Sam Edmund and Kane Cornes are with you to end the week. Dan Houston, he was the main piece, the pillar of the trade period. We spoke about him before the trade period started, during the trade period, and we're still talking about him now once it has ended. He was the big piece, and at the end of it all, in that huge mega trade, thankfully, a couple of days before the deadline, he found his way from Port Adelaide to Collingwood.
Yeah, and I'm just reading a couple of tweets that are left over from that in relation to you and I. Since the Dan Houston deal went through yesterday for him to become a Collingwood player, there is nothing but saltiness and souping from both Kane Cornes and Sam Edmund.
Saltiness.
I wonder if he went to a different club, if the voice would have changed. Then someone else says, Edmund is a Carlton supporter. That's why he's so salty, and Cornes didn't want the trade to happen at all. Stuff him. Go Pies.
Why do they think we care that much about where Dan Houston goes? Why do they care? They got their noses seriously out of joint when I reported, which is an absolute fact, by the way, that his preference was to play for Carlton, where he's incredibly tight with Jack Silvani. But the guy's been around the block a few times. He knew there were no guarantees, and in the end, he was always happy to go to Collingwood. But if given the choice, and I think he touched on it with Andy and Gazy last night, he wanted to get to the Blues. It just didn't work out that way. But that's not what people want to hear, Kane, and they think I'm crying myself to sleep at night. Alas, I am not. But Dan Houston's interview with Andy and Gazy was a heck of a lot more honest than his last radio appearance, which, by the way, he admitted to basically stone cold lying, and he didn't apologise for it either. He said he had to do it and he would do it again just to protect the club going into the final series, which was interesting in itself.
Should we have a listen to that?
Yeah, let's have a listen. This is why he told Adelaide Radio he was staying at Port Adelaide firstly.
Yeah, I guess for me, the reason for me sort of saying that's what I'd said was, to keep the focus of Port playing finals, that way rather than being a distraction. And I felt like it can be addressed at the end of the season. And the only thing that I felt like I could say was, that I was staying and just to put that speculation to sleep for a little bit. And that's the reason why I said it. Obviously, I'm trying to think right now what else I would say. I'd probably still say the same thing, but that's just the reality of everything.
That's the trade period. And people lie all the time.
We saw straight through that, though, didn't we? I
was naive enough to think it was so categoric, and delivered multiple times.
Me a text message. I said, "Mate, it's still on. Like he's still leaving."
I think I did too. He just didn't leave himself even a smidgen of wiggle room, though. I was like, "Well, that's a bald-faced lie."
Yeah. It's a really tough spot to be in because I don't think you can't really win. And he's right. Like the distraction would have been enormous if he said, "No, I'm still going." Now, when you are put on the spot like he was, and you haven't had time to prepare an answer, then sometimes.
I'm sure he knew that question was coming.
But if someone just rushes up to you with but that was actually a scheduled interview as well that he did double down. So maybe he could have just worded it slightly different, which I think he admitted yesterday as well.
Yeah. Charlie, his first choice was Melbourne, not Carlton. No, well, of course. But as you're about to hear, Melbourne quickly became not an option at all. So once Melbourne was parked, that's what I'm talking about. But just on Melbourne, just a massive reminder here that you've got to have your house in order. Now, it sounds obvious, but just not for the winning and the culture and all that stuff, but to be a destination club, to be a club that players want to get to, because we know how competitive this space is. Being Melbourne list boss Tim Lamb, and this happens, the job is hard enough. He would have had a fit when Dan Houston pulled out. Can you imagine the anger? Because he won the commitment from him, and as you're about to hear, Dan changed his mind. This was Dan Houston on why he went back on his idea of joining the Melbourne Footy Club.
I told my manager straight away, and then he said, "Mate, I reckon Melbourne are keen and you can get home and we can keep it super quiet." And then, I guess throughout the year there was a bit of, I don't know how to put it, there was little bit of unrest at Melbourne, it seemed. And I let my manager know that, that probably wasn't the best thing for me to do. I'd probably rather not go there. And then it sort of opened everything right up and it sort of came out a little bit. And then that's when it sort of, opened the door for everyone else, and I had to go through the whole process again.
So there you go.
Well, that's the alarm bells, and I mean the Melbourne Footy Club is fully aware of this. I mean they would be dealing with players and managers all the time that would have similar concerns about the place right now. So that's the catalyst for significant change, you would think, at Melbourne, which they're going through, and we'll wait to see what that happens. But when you when your list and the strength of your team is affected by the off-field drama at your footy club, then there's a significant issue, because we know how even it is. You look at the way that Geelong are able to recruit every year. Even now, Gold Coast is becoming a place that players want to go and play because of the coach that's there, and there's some connections. Even players are wanting to go and join West Coast at the moment. Fremantle have loaded up. Adelaide have got 3 good players, and Melbourne have gone, well, we've got a group now that should be ready to go. We should be like Collingwood and ready to win now, but we're missing pieces of the puzzle because of off-field drama at our footy club and an issue with our culture that we have refused to address. In fact, we've denied it. And so we go to the draft with a couple of youngsters, which may be great in time, but there's an amazing group of free agents coming out. Are they in the mix for any of those? Well, you'd have to say probably not, because of those. Like Dan Houston is an upstanding citizen and a really honest sort of person. And for him to say, no, I'm not going there for those reasons, even though they had probably the best deal on the table for Port Adelaide, alarm bells going off everywhere for the Demons.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that was pretty transparent from Dan last night on that front as well. Mick, what about Tommy Barrass? He was lying for 4 months. Your man, Tommy Barrass.
Well, his was like a little bit different. He was having a crack at the industry though. Tommy, like he was sort of saying essentially that the media was creating a narrative that was false.
He chose the Lance Armstrong defence, which is attack.
for the second year in a row, like the first time he was the one trying to get out, and then he had the nerve to suggest that it was just the media making up stories that happens every year. A key position player, iconic how poorly worded his statement was. But anyway, that's what happens, and the amount of lies being told through trade period is legendary, and it's gone. I think it's gone to a new level this year.
Yeah. No, not even just a lie, but just a narrative that's created by certain sections of an exchange, whether it be a club or a manager and something, just to do your bidding for them in a way. Next thing you know, you realise, hang on, have I been sold a lemon here? Is this actually happening? Like, that happens all the time. It's really difficult. Keep your texts coming through as we go. And just thinking of Melbourne, like Melbourne have done so well with Dan Houston because they got in ahead of the pack. They basically won the commitment from him behind the scenes. Clearly, there was a silent agreement there, only for him to board at the end. So they've done everything right, and then to have it yanked out from underneath them at the end. All right.
Welcome back to the Captain's Run on this Friday. Adam White filling in for Sam Edmund this particular day. Caulfield Cup Eve, Everest Eve. It's a big weekend coming up in the world of racing. We'll do that a little bit later on today with Miles Fitzner. But it is now time to talk some AFL with David Schwarz for U Finance. For the best mortgage deal, visit checkyourrate.com.au, and also for DFib for Life, giving people a second chance at life. And there's been a lot of second chances at football teams over the last week and a half with the trade period. David Schwarz, welcome to the program.
Whitey, good to be here with you.
What was the highlight for you from the trade period? What stood out?
I think Bailey Smith. I think Bailey Smith's a wonderful get. Geelong, have a track record of being able to attract players and then get the very best out of them. So I thought that they stole him. I think he's a wonderful player. He's got so much upside. And Geelong have done really, really, really well to get a quality midfielder who can play. If his leg holds up, well, it's a steal.
If you were the Bulldogs, would have you driven a harder bargain? I mean, they didn't have much draft capital or even to a point player capital to be able to do too much more than they did, and they pushed it right to the edge. Did you feel that it was just one of those things that they just had to get the deal done to get something for him?
Yeah, the player clearly didn't want to be there. Geelong were keen; they committed, so it was always going to happen. So I think both teams were very patient. I think Andrew Mackie did a wonderful job. I think Andrew Mackie throughout the whole trade period has been pretty honest and pretty clear with what they're trying to do. So now Geelong, they just seem to be able to land the good players. It's a destination club, and they've got a good one.
The Dan Houston situation, before we talk about what he said on the run home last night, which I thought was very interesting, just a general feeling from a Collingwood perspective. They've gone and got Harry Perryman as essentially a free player coming through as a free agent, and then Dan Houston giving up their first round pick from next year to get him in the door. they're going all in. Is this something you're comfortable with from a Magpies point of view?
Oh, they've got the list. They're and we talk about destination clubs. They've got their house in order. So if I'm Dan Houston, good decision. Clearly wanted to go to Melbourne early, and then we know the troubles that Melbourne have had. So he balked at that. Clearly then wanted to go to Carlton, couldn't get the deal done, and ended up at another big club. So his management have done a great job. Collingwood are a very, very well organised outfit. So no surprises they're able to land a two-time All-Australian quality player off half-back. They lose Noble, so they pick up a player that's going to give them some serious run off half-back. And with his kicking ability, well, they found an absolute beauty. So, the Dan Houston one was interesting. He was always going to leave. He told some bubbers to the Adelaide press that he was staying. But that's part and parcel of trade week. You've got to be able to keep your cards close to your chest and protect your future, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, a bit of poker. This is what Dan Houston did say on the run home last night. So he chatted to Andy Marr and Andrew Gaze, and there was a bit of a clip. Not a bit of a clip. It was a clip to Melbourne. This is what he said. Does that make you feel as a Melbourne fan when you hear that, Ox?
Yeah, well, we know Melbourne have got their troubles. So, you've got a player who wants to be comfortable. He wants to be reassured. He wants success. And that couldn't be guaranteed at Melbourne. So, not surprised. Melbourne need to get their house in order. They know that. And they're working diligently. They've been able to keep their 2 stars. And they're going to have to work on building those relationships. So there's a bit of work to go at Melbourne, and I think every Melbourne fan would be super disappointed that Dan Houston balked at coming to Melbourne. And for the recruiting staff, Tim Lamb and everybody else involved who have put a lot of hard work in this year, it's gut-wrenching that, you have a quality player pull out in what was an agreed move. But that's business, isn't it? And that's the way of the footy world at the moment, that, you can be successful on the field, but if you don't have your house in order and there's things bubbling behind the scenes, it's going to cause problems and ripple effect. And the ripple effect was they lost Dan Houston.
There is a feeling that as early as today, the review, I don't know whether it's a culture review, but it's just a review on the operations of the Melbourne Footy Club, might be released today or over at least the next sort of 3 or 4 days. Have you got any intel as to what that might look like?
No, I don't. I think it wrapped up last Friday. So, and I don't think the public will get the full report. They'll get a summary of what's transpired. I have no idea how that would be. There'll be shortcomings. There's no doubt, because the unrest that's happened at Melbourne, from players to trade moves to coaches to board. Melbourne have got some issues, and I think with Brad Green at the helm, they'll certainly be able to work through those. The review will point out issues, and they'll address them. So, like in a review, if you don't listen to what's found, that's when you've got issues. I expect Melbourne to act and be able to be pretty proactive with whatever's been directed their way.
Shea Bolton to Fremantle, how big of an impact will he have on the Dockers? And is that the recipe to see them push back inside the top 8?
Yeah, he's a super player, like super player. He's got speed, he's got excitement. He's going to be playing in pretty good conditions every second week. I think it's a no-brainer for him. Disappointing for Richmond. He was a bit of a cult hero at Tigerland, and Fremantle have got themselves a really, really exciting player that could be the cherry on top. They need Tracy fit. I think they've got a forward line that's really potent. If they're not playing finals next year, they are seriously underperforming. They're a good team. They're going to win a lot of games at home. I'd expect them to be a big improver in 2025.
Yeah, it does feel that way. It does, and it certainly does feel like Shea Bolton is exactly what they need, particularly as Michael Walters comes towards the end of his career. Just that razzle dazzle. At times the Dockers can be a bit dour, and I think that he just brings something that sometimes when you have one razzle dazzle player, it actually can be a bit contagious, and the excitement can sort of come off onto some of the other players too.
I reckon he's a bit more than razzle dazzle too.
I think that's fair.
I think they can run him through the midfield at times, and he's got a lot of strings on that bow where he can be really, really impactful in many areas. You know, they can even whip him off half back at times just to give him a lot of run. I think he gives them flexibility, and that's something that Fremantle desperately needs. So, I think Justin Longmuir would be sitting back going, yep, we've landed one that's going to give us so many avenues to attack and just gives us flexibility through the midfield and gives us a chance to surprise teams and I think when you're looking at an opposition, Shea Bolton at Fremantle, he'll be one of the first names up on the board that you need to stop. Otherwise, things could go pretty awful for the opposition if you let him do his own thing.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Now, just with Brisbane not bringing in someone for Joe Danaher. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get a like for like, but to considering how much money he was paid to play in that forward line, how important he was to that forward line, are you surprised that Brisbane didn't at least try and get someone not equal to Joe, but similar to Joe to make sure that they are at the head of the queue when it comes to chances of premierships next year?
Whitey, I say this with all due respect, there is only one Joe Danaher. Now, whichever way you look at it, good, bad, ugly, fantastic, there's only one Joe Danaher. You're not going to be able to replace a Joe Danaher. They're just players of that size, speed, unpredictability. There's only one. So they've got Hipwood, who will take up a bit of the slack. They got the other big forward, I just lost his name for a moment, who's just come onto the scene, a young fella.
Logan Morris?
Logan Morris, of course. And I think Logan Morris has got so much upside. He's only a baby, played limited footy. We saw him stand up in the grand final. I'm not worried about their forward line. Okay. I'm not worried about it one bit. Joe Danaher, as good as he's been, I think it gives opportunities for young fellas. A bit like when Buddy Franklin left, a bit more responsibility lands on Morris and Hipwood, they'll be fine.
Now, I feel, and I don't mean to be mean here, but I feel I have to ask the question that a lot of people have asked me off the temper text in the last 10 minutes. When does Dusty get to Gold Coast Ox?
Well, we've got a couple of weeks. Just sit back and relax. It's not over by it. I'm sure they're still in discussions. Let's just wait and see, Whitey. Let's wait and see.
I'm not going to say time's on your side, but there is still time.
Well, but I never said it was going to happen in the trade period.
No, you didn't.
He'll be at the Gold Coast next year, and then when he retired, I doubled down and I stick to what I said very, very early on, that he'll be playing at the Gold Coast Suns. And as I've said millions of times, it's great for footy. It's great for the Gold Coast. Richmond got every drop out of him. I don't think there's any losers.